I hadn't shot the shit in a while because, well, besides my friends at Stars, I didn't really have that many friends to shoot the shit with. But with Javon and Mackie, I was having a good time. We were having dinner in the mess hall until we hear that and we heard Easterman's dreaded voice saying, Vonnie, Mackie, Ethan, to my office, now. So we got up and we walked down, and then we walked to the end of this little cell block into his office. And outside the door, we could audibly hear the same cop talking. That was a horrible piece of shit. Beat my ass. You don't pay me enough to deal with this, Easterman. You said I was supposed to scare them, and they're supposed to be afraid of me, but now they can't be afraid of me because they kicked my ass. Especially that Ethan Upshur guy. Why are we even helping him? And also, why did you tell me to say the N-word to Javon? He could sue me and win. And Dr. Eastman said, okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. From now on, I'm not going to put you in any simulations with them. In fact, Mackie and Javon, they're going to be gone soon. And also, Mia, Ethan's wife, has been giving us hell, so we might release him soon, too. I just need a minute to talk to him. And the cop said, damn well better. And he stormed out. He didn't even bother to look at us as he walked away. We stepped in his office, and he said, well, I'm sure you heard that. Guys, why did you beat up Lee Franklin? Wait, that's his name, I said? Yeah, his name is Lee Franklin. Wait. Alright, and I said, okay, well, maybe it's because he was attacking us with a taser stick. And Mackie stepped in and said, yeah, we supposed to let him get away with that? And Dr. Eastman said, yeah, but he's an employee, and he doesn't deserve to be beaten on the job. Alright, well, guys, I just want you to know that you're not going to have any more simulations with him. Okay? And Javon stepped in and said, I got a question. I've been here longer than a week now, and I got to ask, what is so therapeutic about this therapy? And Dr. Eastman said, okay, I'm kind of glad you asked that. You see, what it does is, it forces you to confront your past trauma. And it helps you just be brave in front of it. And then I chirped in and said, now how do we know this is ethical? And Dr. Eastman said, well, some call it not, but I think it is. And I said, alright, okay. So when's our next simulation, I asked. He said, okay, well, tomorrow, after breakfast, I'll give you your next assignment. Oh, and also, you're going to be working with Jennifer tomorrow. I really want to build up some teamwork, okay? Okay, we said. And we walked out. On that day, I decided, well, I had begun listening to Radiohead a lot more, but I want to listen to a lot more than just Radiohead. So I bought. They also sold CDs in the store, and they also had some records. So I bought a vinyl copy of Paranoid by Black Sabbath because, yeah, I love that song. Some may call it overrated or overplayed, but I love it. And I bought just a couple of Radiohead albums. I already had the Benz and OK Computer, but I decided to buy Kid Amnesia, which is the combined force of Kid A and Amnesiac, those two popular albums by Radiohead. And that day, I also heard some Ozzy Osbourne's new music on the radio, and I actually really enjoyed it. And that whole night, all I did was just listen to music and lift weights. And yeah, I was really pumping the iron. And then, but that night, I went to bed, and I had a dream. I had a dream that I was back in the mental hospital. You see, I might not have told you this, but Mia did send me to a mental hospital after the events of Templegate because, guys, you don't understand. Templegate really messed me up. And I had a dream that I was sitting in the therapy circle and I saw Conway. And I also saw Jessica and Lynn for some reason, and one of the patients from St. Stephen's. Why am I suddenly feeling guilty after all these years? Surely there must be some explanation for this. So I decided to put on a CD to think about it. Okay, I couldn't listen to this no more. I need to listen to something else. So I turned on the radio, and that morning I went down for pills. And yeah, that's when I really felt like a mental patient again, as they gave me the old familiar pills. Yep. I was patient number 9, as Ozzy said. Well, right after breakfast, just as Dr. Easterman said, he called all 4 of us down and handed us a file. And in that file, it said, our mission was very important and a little bit complicated. Our mission was to get on a carnival ride. Huh. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So we put on our old beige uniforms, which was covered in our own sweat, sometimes burn marks, sometimes blood or fake blood, whatever. And we put on our headsets and we walked through those revolving doors into the moving room. And we sat down, and honestly, I was afraid we would get gassed again. But as we moved, no, we didn't. I looked over at Jennifer. Sorry, not Jessica. I get confused which one is which. But Jennifer, and I said, "So, we're going to a carnival? Yeah, like a county fair." Although it's weird because most of the county fairs I went to back in North Carolina didn't have any roller coasters, because roller coasters are pretty expensive. And Javon cut in and said, "Yeah, I used to love roller coasters. I used to go to Carowinds all the time." And Mackie said, "In Ireland, we used to have like family fun parks, but I never got to go. We were too poor." And I said, "Okay, well, first time for everything." I asked her. But then again, I asked Jessica, because she never answered. What, Jessica? I keep on wanting to say Jessica. Jennifer, I'm sorry. I was thinking about her again, because I had a horrible dream about her the night before. And I asked Jennifer, I said, "So Jennifer, and she said, "Well, I was always afraid of roller coasters, and carnivals were full of people. I don't like them." And I said, "Okay, I understand. So we continued our ride, and then it stopped. And so we got out from our chairs and stepped into what appeared to be a parking lot, but it looked like the cars were made out of cardboard, or they kind of looked like bumper cars. And Maggie said, "I used to love those when I was little. I used to love that." And then we walked through the gate that said County Fair. And you see the county fair had snack booths where vendors should be, and games set up, but everything was just empty, and leaves were flying around, even though we were in a big warehouse. Where the hell did they get leaves? Well, I guess they probably just took some leaves from outside and then just sprayed them everywhere. That's probably what they did. And it was just, there was a chill in the air. They must have cranked up the AC pretty hard. And so we just walked around. And then Jennifer started to shiver. And I said, "Jennifer, what's wrong?" Nothing, she said. "Alright, okay. But I've been with women long enough to know, yeah, it's something." And then, out of nowhere, Mackie proclaimed, "It's Starlight Cafe! It's Starlight Cafe!" And he ran inside, and he said, "Oh, Starlight Cafe, It's just like I remember. Hardly a thing's changed. How did they know I used to go here every weekend? How did they know? And then I looked across the window outside of the Starlight Cafe and I said, "Hey guys, is that the ride we're supposed to get on?" And the ride said the root canal. Huh. Okay. And I said, all right. And then I saw a man, he was dressed in an old bellhop uniform. And I said, "Hey guys, I think that's where we get on. There's a guy in there, like a living man." And so we all rushed over there. And sure enough, a tall black man in an old bellhop uniform was there. And we said, "All right, let us on the ride, please." And he said, No, I can't let you on without a ticket." And Mackie said, "How the hell you expect us to get tickets, mate?" And he said, "Well, you can get tickets by playing the games around here. Like that game over there." And he pointed to one of the game booths. And it was called Balls and Holes. Okay? And the game was pretty simple. You were given 3 balls, but you had to put 2 balls in the hole. Okay, and you had to throw them. And on the wall, there was what appeared to be a target, but the hole was only about 2 or 3 times larger than the ball itself, so you had to have some good aim. And Javon said, "All right, I used to play baseball. Here we go." And he picked it up and threw it. And he came close, but he missed at first. And then he threw it again. And then this time it did go in, and a little bell rung. And then he took his arm back with a really good wind-up. I know, because I like baseball too. And he threw it, and the crowd went wild. And then a yellow ticket came out, and he said, yeah. And he handed over the ticket. I was like, and he said, "All right, okay, now you'll let us on the ride, right?" And the bouncer looked at him and said, "I'll let you on the ride, but all 4 of you have to have a ticket. And your whole team has to get on together in order to complete the trial." Okay, of course we do. Why would we not? And then, out of nowhere, we all hear, "Yoo-hoo, baby." And we looked over, and it was a 5'6" black woman holding a crowbar with big, thick, curly hair. Baby. And she was wearing messy clothes, and she started walking towards us. And Javon got real wide-eyed and said, we gotta go. And I said, "Wait, what?" And he ran, and we chased him. And then he jumped and hid into one of the gaming booths. And we jumped in right after him and said, "Javon, what's wrong?" And he said, "It's my ex-girlfriend. Don't fight her. She's crazy. She tried to beat me with a damn crowbar one time. Yeah, I literally ran away screaming from her. Why? She crazy." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm sure she's not that bad." And he said, Yep, she's that bad. All right, okay, we need to get 3 more tickets, and then after that, we can get out of here. All right, okay, we can Alright, so I'm pretty sure they'll only let you get one ticket from one booth. So, I hate to say it, but we need to split up. Alright, okay. And Mackie said, well, you don't have to tell me twice, mate. And he ran away. And then Jennifer vaulted over the game booth and ran. And then I quietly walked out, and I decided to greet this young black lady. I said, hello, ma'am. What's your name? And she said, Rhonda. Well, hi, Rhonda. I'm Ethan. And she said, where's Javon? And I didn't tell her where Javon was. And I said, well, I'm not so sure Javon wants to see you. And then she raised the crowbar and said, where's Javon? And I said, okay, yep, you are crazy. So I ran. And then, this is kind of embarrassing, but I quickly jumped into a big blue trash can, and then I hid. Because, well, if I get caught beating up a black woman and the news hears about this, I'm going to be so canceled. I'm going to be canceled on Twitter, canceled on YouTube, and I might even get fired from my job. Nope. And it was I can't even tell you how fast my heart was beating when she got near. And she said, baby, where are you? And she mercifully walked away. Man, she wasn't like the cop, though. And I jumped out, and I said, okay, I have to win one of these games. But then a blue light caught my eye, and I saw it, and it was kind of an ocean-themed game. And it said, kill the Kraken. Okay. And it was a water gun game. So I grabbed the water gun that was on the rails, and then the music started, and it was a Drunken Sailor, you know, the song from SpongeBob that goes and then I started, and so the giant octopus head came out from different areas in the wall, and I had to shoot it. And I sprayed once, and I did miss a little bit, but I hit it on the second time. And then there was a certain amount of water I had to get in there, and I started filling it up more and more and more until eventually it popped. And then, ding, and a ticket came out, a yellow ticket. I got a golden ticket, hell yeah. And then, out of nowhere, a crowbar swung right on top of the game booth. And she said, and then it swung right in my face. Oh, it hit me right in the eyes, and if it hit me any lower, it would have given me a bloody nose. And then, as soon as she raised it again, I grabbed it and then punched her. Damn it. I shouldn't have done that. Hopefully the news doesn't find out about this. And I ran back to the same booth where Javon was, and I indeed confirmed he was still in there. And then I said, all right, where's the other guys? Where's the other guys? And then Mackie vaulted over and said, yeah, I won a game of basketball. I would have beat your ass in that. And Javon said, yeah, real funny. Wait, where's Jennifer? Since I got the super strength around here, I guess I'm the one who's going to go find Jennifer. And Mackie said, you would be correct in that assumption, mate. Alright. And so I stepped out and started walking through this big maze of gaming booths. Some of them had games available, but some didn't. And then I heard a scream, so I ran towards it, and then I saw Jennifer and Rhonda fighting, and then Jennifer said, "You don't want to mess with me, bitch." And so she slapped her right in the face, and then Rhonda raised her crowbar, and I ran right behind her, and I got her in a headlock. Rhonda. And then I squeezed until she finally calmed down, and no, I didn't choke her out. What I did was I let go and I pushed her over, and then I said, "All right, Jennifer, let's go." And then we ran back into our undesignated safe house. And then, all right, now we were all four of us were back together. Okay. All right, Jennifer, did you get a ticket? And she looked around a minute and said, "Okay, yes, I did." And I said, "Oh, okay. Just out of curiosity, what game did you get?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, it was, those dart games that are fun? Yeah, I like those." All right, okay. Well, let's walk over to the root canal. And then all four of us walked over, and in some uncharacteristic strength, Jennifer said, "All right, buddy, you better let us in now." And he said, "All right, show me your tickets." And we showed the bouncer the tickets, and we walked in. And I saw what appeared to be some red water that was trying to look like blood. And I said, "Oh, it looks like this is a boat ride. Not really a roller coaster. But it's okay." And then a duck boat came out, and I thought, okay. And I got in the front. Jennifer rode shotgun, and Mackie and Javon rode in the back. And I thought, is this going to be like a tunnel of love thing? And then I heard a chugga chugga sound, and then whew, we landed in the water and started going. And then, yeah, it was very much like It's a Small World. And, to pass the time, because we were riding through the dark. Well, it wasn't that dark, but it was just barely lit in that tunnel thing we were in. I started singing, "It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all." And then Jennifer joined me a little bit. "It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all." "Shut the fuck up," Mackie said. Good. All right. And then we got into the main hallway of the ride. And just as I feared, there was toothbrushes and teeth, big teeth the size of cars, and bloody gums. And I thought, oh, God. I buried my face in my hands. And they said, "What's wrong?" "It's there. This is to get at me. My mom was a dental hygienist. She was kind of like a dentist assistant. After the divorce, she went to do that full time." Of course, they just want to mess with me. And then as I was explaining it, there was a sharp drop. Ooh! And then we were once again floating. And then there were some teeth drills and some, mirrors that dentists use. Yeah, no wonder I was afraid of the dentist when I was young. And then we approached another dark tunnel, and then a big set of doors open, and then there was a big hill. And then chugga, 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 chugga. And I said, "All right, arms up, guys." We're about to go in to a big hill. Chugga, chugga. This will be just like Splash Mountain. Chugga, 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 chugga. Whee! And then the whole boat filled with water, and and a massive wave hit us, and then I realized there's water all around us. We were underwater briefly, and the whole duck boat was flooded, and we were floating on the water. The fuck? And I thought, whoa, what the fuck? And I said, are you okay? Is everyone okay? And Javon and Mackie nodded, and Jennifer was shivering. I'm cold. It's okay. We'll get out of this soon. And then it was dark again. Damn, who would ever want to ride this thing? And then we all heard a sound, and then we started going faster. And then it was hard to make out in the dark, but eventually I saw it. What was ahead was at least 20 saw blades right above the water, and they were spinning. Okay, we gotta get out of here, guys. See the saw blades? We gotta get out. Okay, is there anywhere we can get out? Wait, hold on. There's a door right there. And Javon said, well, how are we supposed to get there? Can you swim? I said, swim. And I remember that was one of the questions on the medical questionnaires they asked me, can I swim? And I assumed, well, I was correct in assuming that they could all swim, and they got the same questionnaire. And so we jumped out, and then, oh, God, that water was cold. Now I know how people in the Titanic must have felt. Old. And then I started swimming. And then I saw what looked like a blue door. It was flat against the wall. And then I reached for it, and it was stiff and hard, and I pushed it, but it didn't give. And then I realized, oh no, God, no. It's a fake door painted in the wall. You asshole, I screamed. And I said, and Javon said, what's going on? As he was struggling to tread water. Those bastards, I said. And then the current got stronger as it was dragging us towards the saw blades. And then I looked, and all the saw blades appeared to be on the surface. And then I saw the duck boat glide right into the saw blades. And then and wood splinters started flying everywhere. And then I looked above, and on the ceiling, on some kind of catwalk, appeared to be a guy controlling the saw blades. And we screamed, turn it off! Turn it off! And he looked down at us and shook his head. What a great help he was. So we got out. And then I noticed that all the damage to the boat was on top. And also, those are some expensive saw blades, and they wouldn't let an expensive saw blade rust. And I said, guys, what we have to do is we have to swim under it. And Javon looked at me and Mackie said, are you crazy? And I said, well, you got a better idea? Because we're being rushed towards those spinning saw blades. We got to swim under them. Okay, and then Jennifer got scared again and said, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know. And I said, yes, you can. You either swim under them or you die. Okay? Okay. And then we held our breaths, and then we burst straight forward like a torpedo. And then when we were certain we were safe, we emerged again, and our heads were throbbing from the cold water. But then we saw something. What appeared to be a wall, but there was a ledge you would climb on, almost like the end of a pool. And we all swam. We swam ferociously towards that. And then, as soon as we climbed up, all that cold air hit us. And I still get shivers thinking about it. And I helped Jennifer up, and all four of us. And I said, was I right or was I right? And in the distance, I saw a door that said exit. And I said, all right, guys, here we go. And then we walked through that door. And then a loud voice over the intercom said, the shuttle will be here shortly. And I shivered, teeth chattering, said, that's okay. Take your time. Really, take your time. It's not like we could get pneumonia or hypothermia or anything. And then we saw that merciful shuttle coming in the distance. But there was something that came out of the shadows. Something that was supposed to represent my mother. And it was the same big woman from the house. And it said, leaving so soon? Come give Mama some sugar. And she reached out with her metal claws again and started to chase us. And we ran as fast as we could. And thank God she was as big as she was, because if she was skinny, I don't think we would have made it. And that adrenaline really came in. And then we ran onto the shuttle, and then we opened the door, but the mother was on her heels, and I said, it's okay, I'll hold her off. And then I faced right towards her, and she was only about 2 feet away from me, and she raised her claws, but then I slapped her right across the face. I slapped her so hard that she fell back a little bit, and then I kicked her right in the stomach. And I said, you dare mock my mother? And I spat at her. And then I ran. I ran to the shuttle, I jumped in and closed the door and sat down on those leather seats. And Dr. Easterman said, well, I'm proud of you guys, but you didn't have to use violence. And I said, yes, the fuck we did. Okay. And the shuttle started, and the voice on the intercom said, here, have some heat. And then he turned the heat on. And okay. That felt good. And we must have been in that shuttle for like 10 minutes. And honestly, I think the shuttle was intentionally going slow so we could warm up. And then we got back to the cell block. And we walked through the revolving doors. And then there stood Easterman, holding what looked like footy pajamas, but they were all furry and they just looked warm. And then he said, all right, when you go and take hot showers, just Put these on, okay? And in order to prevent hypothermia, take those wet, cold clothes off. And we did. And then we were all naked in front of each other, but we were so cold and distressed that we didn't care. And we ran right in that shower. And that shower, that warm shower, was one of the best feelings I ever had. Yeah. And now all four of us were showering together, but we were so cold we didn't care. And it was an amazing feeling. And then after we stepped out of the shower, we were all wet, but we didn't care. And then one of the nurses gave us freshly heated towels. And then we walked down, dry, but still completely naked. And then we put on those footy pajamas. And then we walked to the TV room and said, alright, okay, we need to watch something. Something wholesome. And Jennifer suggested, hey, since Christmas is coming up soon, let's watch a Christmas movie. And I said, okay. And then, after that, we couldn't decide on what movie to watch, but since most of us were from the South, we decided to watch Christmas Vacation. And we sat on a couch and used one of the blankets. And then we just laid there the whole night. And they found us the next day, snuggled up on that couch.